Howdy, Rex here. More insanity in the news, believe it or not. Woke up this morning to find an article, or actually a TV show, The Morning Joe. General Stanley McChrystal was on there, and he made some interesting comments. Of course, the topic had to be centered on gun control, particularly the assault rifles ban. And to make his case against the private ownership of assault rifles, General Stanley McChrystal referenced the muzzle velocity of the .223 cartridge. So let me share with you his comments, and then we'll take a look at them a little more closely. So General Stanley McChrystal's talking here. I spent a career carrying typically either the M16 or the M4 carbine. The M4 carbine fires a .223 caliber round, which is a 5.56 millimeter, at 3,000 feet per second. When it hits a human body, the effects are devastating. It's designed for that. That's what our soldiers ought to carry. I personally don't think there's any need for that kind of weaponry on the streets, and particularly around the schools in America. And then McChrystal goes on to expound on how serious actions are necessary to get these kinds of weapons out of the hands of civilians. Really? Now, he referenced the muzzle velocity of the .223 cartridge, making it much more lethal. You know, he didn't mention hunting rounds, but their platform has always been that civilians ought to only have hunting rounds. They shouldn't have military rounds because military rounds are so much more lethal. Now, for those of you who may not be familiar with what we're talking about here, let me show you. This is the 5.56 millimeter NATO round. This is the cartridge that is used in an AR-15 rifle or the military's M4 or the M16, okay? An M249 squad automatic weapon as well. This is shooting a 62 grain bullet, okay? And it's a non-expanding bullet. It's meant to not expand. Out of an M4 carbine, it's not going quite 3,000 feet a second. It's going more like 2,900 feet a second because the barrel length is about 14.5 inches in the military issue M4s. So it's going almost 3,000 feet a second. And I definitely wouldn't want to get shot with one of these. That would not be fun. But it's interesting. Okay, so you got a 62 grain bullet coming out of here, non-expanding, at 2,900 feet a second. And this is too deadly for American civilians to have. This is your uncle's deer hunting round. This is a quintessential deer rifle cartridge right here. This is a .270 Winchester, okay? This was shooting a 62 grain bullet. This is shooting a 130 grain bullet, over twice as large as this little guy. And it's going 250 feet per second faster. This is going well over 3,000 feet a second. So you got exponentially more devastating round right here in this normal hunting cartridge than you do this. Way more. In fact, the little .223 here has been deemed to be too small for use for deer hunting in many states because it's not powerful enough to humanely kill a deer. Too small for deer. A lot of states this is illegal to use for deer, okay? And even up here where I shoot, a lot of guys consider this too small of a round to use on gophers because the bullet is so tiny that it has a real hard time getting through the wind, so you can't hit anything when there's any wind because it's such a tiny little bullet. So that's interesting, huh? Take another look here. This is a 7mm Remington Magnum. This is another very popular sporting cartridge that your grandpa probably would use for deer or for elk hunting. And this shoots an even bigger bullet. This is a 140 grain bullet going even faster than that one was. So what's the deal here? Now I could expect an ignorant statement like the .223 is too powerful of a round for civilians to have. I could expect a ridiculous statement like that to be made by someone like Dianne Feinstein from California who's absolutely clueless to reality, what's going on, or maybe some of these emotionally charged people over in Connecticut after the atrocity there, some of these politicians in Connecticut who probably never done any hunting or anything like that or have absolutely no background knowledge of ballistics. I could expect a statement like that from those guys. But McChrystal, he's a general. And he was in charge of the operation in Afghanistan for a while. He's not stupid. So what's going on here? I think what we have is there's this technique that people use throughout history called the Hegelian dialectic process, okay? And there's a lot of different mechanisms to which they use to basically psych us out and manipulate us to get their goals accomplished. And one of the things is a two-step process. They're trying to accomplish something that is going to be very, very unpopular. So what they do is they take 2 steps forward. 1 step forward that they want to get and another extra ridiculous step. They know that the people are going to fight back. So what they'll do, they'll surrender the ridiculous step for now, but they still made it that 1 step forward. And that's as far as the people will fight back. So the NRA groups and your conservatives, when they propose, let's say they propose some new legislation, they have an assault rifles ban, which is a really bad idea. They ban certain kinds of ammunition, and they ban the .223 cartridge. And full registration, they have this huge pile of legislation that they're trying to push through. They know that a bunch of it is going to get debated, and they're going to have to, redraw the laws to get a lot of that stuff taken out. So then your NRA can claim victory, and all of the other gun rights people can kind of feel like they maybe accomplished something. But in reality, they were taking an extra step forward because they knew they'd get kicked back a notch. And so they still took a step forward. Eventually, you reach the goal doing that. So I think that's probably what's going on. And the media has been really pushing that lately, too. They'll reference that a lot, that this round is too deadly to have on the streets. Well, this is a pipsqueak of a round. It's barely suitable for... you could shoot a deer with it. I've taken deer with this round, and it sort of works, but it's really too small for deer hunting. So when you see this kind of ignorance being portrayed on the television set, you guys got to, make sure that everyone around you who might be talking about this, and when you're in the world and people are debating, you got to let them know the facts. You got to share information like this with them so that, they can't reach their goals so easily, at least. You guys need to start using your First Amendment, because if you don't use it now, you're not going to have it anymore. You're going to have to basically get on the case of your senators and your representatives and all your elected officials, and you're going to have to let them know. You're going to say this kind of ridiculous legislation that you guys are discussing in this ridiculously stupid debate is not warranted, and we're not going to basically go along with it. And you need to demand that they start standing for the Constitution, which they swore an oath to uphold and defend, okay? And if you've got a congressman or a senator in your state that is relatively conservative, maybe they have an R in front of their name, and they're supposedly, a good pro-Second Amendment guy, you need to ask those guys, how come they're not doing their job? You need to demand that that guy in your state leads the charge in the fight against this ridiculous debate that's going on right now. Because if they don't start to grow some and start to basically put their foot down, they're working for us. You got to remind them of that. And I'm afraid that it's getting pretty close to too late. So if you've got enough time to go to Walmart and dig through the bargain bin looking for some cheap movie, that you can watch later tonight, or if you got time to screw around on Facebook, you really ought to have time to write a letter to your elected officials, because this is extremely important, and you'll only know how important it was once you lose it, okay? And you don't want to get that far. So again, on the bottom, if you look in the description of this video, where it has the description, I'm going to put a link to a page. It's congress.org. All you have to do, this is all you have to do. You click that link, it'll take you to the page. You fill in a small message. It'll take 40 seconds, okay, to write out a message saying, we're not going to tolerate any new gun legislation. All it does is removes the guns from the hands of the law-abiding people and ensures that they're in the hands of the bad guys. And I demand you to do your job and defend the Constitution. Write just a real brief message to all your elected officials, and then enter your information, and it will basically look up all your senators and your representatives, and it'll automatically format and send it in an email form to them, and then it also gives the option to print it. Do the print it option, refine it, make sure it looks good, sign your name to it, and mail it in. And if you don't get a response, call up their office. You got to say something. You got to demand that these guys do their jobs. And you're probably not going to have any luck convincing one of the people on the far left to go along with this. But especially if you've got so-called conservatives that are serving for you, you got to remind those guys that you're watching and that they must do their job. Because if you don't do it now, it's not going to be a good deal when we lose our Second Amendment, because we're going to very shortly after that lose our First Amendment, and then the whole system is pretty much a thing of the past. So you got to make the choice what's important to you. So pass this along to everyone you know, anyone who might be a little confused on the subject of the lethality of these different cartridges. If you know anyone who thinks that the AR-15 is too deadly of a weapon system because the cartridge is so powerful, you need to pass this on to them. And even the firepower argument is ridiculous. I mean, try telling that to like Simo Heiha from Finland, who killed like 505 guys with a bolt-action rifle. Didn't even have an assault rifle. Didn't even have a detachable magazine. Just a bolt-action rifle that holds 5 shots. Or all the guys in history who have racked up the most confirmed kills. It was all on bolt-actions. It wasn't on assault rifles. So the arguments are more than moot, but they're very well structured, and I think they have a serious agenda.